there.
Yeah, mine's pretty much the same as it's been.
It didn't shift that much. But just so folks, this just kind of gives the history if you want to read it about what happened. That there was maps that were proposed. There was a new stand. Actually, do you want to step in and talk? So I'm not the only one talking this whole time. I know, but I want to sip my water. You want to tell us about redistricting?
I was thinking we're going to the backyard getting my water.
I know. Should. Well, after this, we can.
So every 10 years, as you all know, we have to redistrict according to the census. 10 years ago, as most people know, the Republicans passed maps that were horribly gerrymandered. Despite the fact that we have been pushing for a new nonpartisan drawing of the maps, it obviously didn't happen. There were several maps that were put forward. Eventually, the Supreme Court did accept the governor's maps, which did actually even up the playing field somewhat. They weren't perfect, but they're better than what we had. Then it ended up going back to the United States Supreme Court, who kicked it back to our Supreme Court. I'm trying to remember, I want to make sure I have this in the right order.
The shadow docket, yeah. It never got to the Supreme Court, but Amy Coney Barrett kicked it back.
Yes, kicked it back to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, who, after a couple of weeks of deliberation, which I don't think really happened, they did once again approve the gerrymandered Republican maps. One of the standards that we have to try to meet is to create, this is where I get confused, black opportunity districts. The governor's maps created 7, the Republican maps created 5. What else was in there? I'm trying to remember.
Currently we have 6.
We have 6.
We have 6. And the reason that Amy Coney Barrett kicked it back is that you might have violated the Voting Rights Act because you took race into consideration, possibly, not explicitly, but possibly in violation of the Voting Rights Act. And that was enough for the state Supreme Court to say, oh, we're going to issue different maps completely, which also take race into consideration because it reduces it.
Why would you involve the federal government when it should be the state of Wisconsin?
Yeah.
We didn't take it there.
Yeah. Why is it? It's a good question. Because of the Voting Rights Act. So the Voting Rights Act is a federal law, and so therefore they had the appeal from those that appealed. They said that we think that there is a violation, so they appealed it to the U.S. Supreme Court.
And the other
Supreme Court said, figure it out yourself.
The Supreme Court said, they said that there's a possibility that this is in violation. Again, to be clear, they didn't say there's a violation. They said there's a possibility of a violation, which is a huge difference.
And threw it back to the state.
Yeah, to say, oh, you should reconsider this. And they didn't have to. They could have absolutely said, no, we think that there is enough support to say that these districts are fine. But unfortunately, there was one Supreme Court justice who switched his vote, named Brian Hagedorn, who bowed to public pressure, which is something judges are never supposed to do. But unfortunately, in this case, they did.
Here lies the problem with our politics.
Yeah,
Instead of you people sitting at the table and sit down and compromise. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
But
it's frustrating.
It's
sickening. It is. It's very frustrating. And unfortunately, they issued the ruling on April 15th, which is the same day that signatures started for all candidates, which basically blocked the ability to appeal for any further redress this cycle. So there's a possibility in the future that the maps get looked at again by the courts, but they basically ran out the clock. And so we're stuck with the worst maps.
Can I just quickly address what you brought up about sitting down and working it out and compromising? Maybe you know.
I'm talking on both sides.
I know.
I'm sick of.
But maybe you know, I have been in the legislature for 24 years. When I was first elected, we could very easily sit across from somebody and compromise. We could go out for dinner and work out issues. We would leave our disagreements behind us in the Assembly chamber or the Senate chamber. That is not happening anymore.
No, on both sides though.
Well, when you're this far in the minority, you can't even work with these people because they like to treat the minority like we're wallflowers.
Who are these people?
The Republicans, the majority party.
It is, it's set up.
I mean, that's the way that's what I have seen in the last 24 years.
I don't
is
understand this.
Yeah.
I'm at an age where, from what I remember as a kid growing up, and I grew up in a Democrat family,
Sure.
it was, you had, you run the race and you won, and they just would compromise. Now, I don't care what party becomes president, whoever gets the most people in the thing, in the politics of it, you're all assholes, excuse my French.
Well,
But I want it my
Tell me how you really feel.
way. I don't
Yeah.
care if you're Democrat or
Sure.
Republican.
yeah. I would.
And then us little people are in the middle of all of this because of egos.
I would say, and I recognize your frustration.
Yeah.
I would say that this is something I've learned the hard way. I worked at a nonpartisan level personally as a county board supervisor, where I could work with people who actually later went on to be elected to state office and had a different letter after their name. But at the county board level, we were all fine. We could work. We had to vote on things, and everyone worked together. It got to the state level. I remember specifically my first day on the floor pointing out flaws in the bill, and they just looked at me cross-eyed like, "What are you doing? No one cares what you have to say." And they were just like, they did a maneuver called tabling, which means it just cuts off the debate, puts my bill to the side, and it's never returned to again. And the bill that we were dealing with at the time, and I'll never forget it, was dealing with abuse of seniors. The abuse of seniors in senior living facilities, and what documents are discoverable, which is just a lawyerly term for when you bring a lawsuit against a abusive facility or a facility where abuse has happened, of what documents you can get. And this blocked all of them. It said that your loved one could be in a senior facility and be repeatedly abused to the point where they die. And then if you want to go and say, well, what the heck happened? They could say, we don't need to tell you. We don't need to tell you anything. And you could say, okay, well, I'm going to get a lawyer, and I'm going to try to find out what happened. And they'd say, good luck. And the lawyer would come, and they'd say, guess what? The law's on our side. We don't have to tell you squat. And they could be purposefully abusive, and they do not have to say anything. That was the first bill that passed when I was in the state Senate. I remember coming up with bills of saying, okay, if there's explicit problems, if this happens over and over, we have to you can discover under those cases. And they just said, table, move to table, no debate, no discussion, no, you know what, here's the reason why we think this is a good idea. Let me explain why we think it's okay for some of these facilities. No discussion, no debate. They sat down, and that was it. I went back to my office, I poured myself a stiff drink, and I said, what the hell have I gotten myself into? And it has been like that for the last 11 years, where if you bring an idea, it doesn't matter how common sense it is, if it is not from them, it is not from their side, sorry, sit down, shut up. And that's been it. And so and to make things worse, under gerrymandering, it tilts the playing field so that if there's a fair election, a 50-50 election, and we have them all the time, we have the closest state in the country, 50-50 election, under the new maps, they get 62% of the seats. 50-50, they get 62%. In the state Senate, they get 66% of the seats. So it further incentivizes them to never work with us, ever, on any single issue, which is why we get in these problems. So we try, and my gosh, I try. I'm drunk driving every session. I'll get a Republican on a bill or two, and then they'll just say, oh, sorry, we don't want to give any victories to any Dems. Yeah.
I mean, this might be a good time to explain what happened with the MIA bill.
Yeah, we can jump to that, yes.
Yeah,
Let's jump to that next, but just to give you a visual picture of every...
understand what is going on in Madison.
Yeah.
So the last couple of sessions, I drafted a bill. Let me back up a minute.
Do we have a slide for it?
Ed Sheeran came to me and he said, boss, I have this great idea. You want to hear about it? I said, sure. So he was telling me about, he works with this group called the MIA Recovery Program. It's a volunteer group out of the university system. Every summer, these volunteers use their own money, fly to France. Well, right now they're doing France, fly to France, and they find our MIAs through research and technology. We have all the technology now. They can pinpoint exactly where they are and who they are. Problem was, it was being paid for by the federal government, all the equipment and stuff. So everything was considered top secret. We had no idea who they were bringing home. So I thought to myself, wait a minute, we've we've got 1,600 MIAs yet from World War II in Wisconsin. Is there a way we can just make this a Wisconsin program and concentrate on bringing home our MIAs? So we drafted a bill. Basically, it would be same premise. It's all volunteer. The only thing that had to be paid for was the equipment. Sometimes you would have to go over there and maybe pay the landowner some money so they could access the property. Last 2 sessions, I've had just about every legislator sign on to it. This session, every legislator signed on to it except for one, and that would have been Speaker Robin Voss. It went through the Assembly Committee, the Senate Committee, went through Joint Finance unanimously, went through the Senate unanimously, never got a vote in the Assembly. You know why? Because they don't want the governor to take credit for this fantastic program. So it didn't pass again. A bill that is, everybody benefits from.
Egos.
Egos, yeah. And I worked with this bill, with Republican Assembly Member Ken Skronsky. He is now retiring, so I have to find another Republican to work with on it. But I'm not giving up. But that is what's going on. Robin Voss didn't want Tony Evers to get the credit for passing, for signing this great program into law. And so we'll start it all over the next session and try to get it done.
Yeah.
But that's what we're dealing with.
So that's the one that's referenced up there.
That now.
And just to give you an idea of, this is the visualization of what happened with the bills this session, just to show how there is a purposeful. They don't want to have Evers get anything done. So these are the number of bills that are proposed: 4,523 in yellow. The number that are enacted are the green, 266, and the number of vetoed are 126. So most bills, and for the most part, most of these bills in yellow never get a hearing at all. There's just, it was last session that we were in for a record low number of times. So that standard was not, we didn't beat that one this time, but we're still in a ridiculously low amount of times. So it's frustrating because it's, if we can have debate, if we can have discussion about some of the bigger problems that are coming up, but it just doesn't. It doesn't even. I mean, we didn't have a single bill. I don't think we had a single high-level bill dealing with opioids and drug abuse this entire session, which is probably one of the biggest problems in our community and across the state. Nothing. I know that there is a question about crime and reckless driving. Nothing. Drunk driving. Nothing. Not a single bill passed related to drunk driving.
Well, I'm a victim of my car being stolen twice.
Yeah.
I lived in Milwaukee. First time it happened, we got the car back. Second time, the young man smashed it up. All he got was a slap on the wrist. I was supposed to get a letter. I was supposed to get money back for the car. No,
Yeah.
When I called the Waukesha, it's in Wauwatosa, the juvenile court.
Okay.
And no, we just don't have the capability to follow up on this stuff.
Yeah. And that's
And the sad thing is the mother was a gangbanger. So, and I heart with my whole heart told this young man I forgave him, and you want to try, and now you just see every night you're seeing this crap, and unless these kids are held accountable. And what happened to the parents?
Mm-hmm.
Parents they were underage. The parents were responsible for their kids.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
It's. And this is large. I mean, it's not to completely try and dodge it, but it is largely a local issue, a local jurisdiction to try and be able to deal with the day-to-day. I will say that the state has, unfortunately.
I was working in Milwaukee, right by on 7th and Virginia.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry that happened. I'm sorry that happened to you. And that is, it's frustrating. Yeah, I mean, there should be laws to be able to adjust that. There should be funds to make sure that we're dealing with it appropriately, and unfortunately, that those things are happening.
The problem is that the family is being destroyed. How many of these kids in these poor sections they live with mom?
Yeah.
Mom is working 2-3 jobs, and who's there to watch these kids?
Yeah. Well, this is, I mean, a lot of it.
Until
when
But
you're
the adults
when-
get their heads out of their ass.
well, when you're
Things aren't going to change.
you got your we're gonna put a swear jar up here for next time for you. I know you're frustrated, but just try your best to restrain it. I know that maybe some people might have a problem. I don't have a problem with it, but some people might. So I don't want to keep moving down that. I will say a lot of this comes back to making sure that there is robust public education, because that makes sure that every child has access to a better life, to people who believe in them, teachers who believe in them, and a community that is going to surround them with not just knowledge, but a pathway to a better life. And if you don't have that, in a lot of cases, unfortunately, in some of the highest turnover districts, or districts that are lowest funded, there's a high turnover of students who are unhoused, particularly in Milwaukee, where the numbers that were recently shown show that that I think it's 1 in 5 students rotates through the school districts, and they're making up for a huge number of shifts, and there's just not parents, there's not teachers who are paying attention to them. So you need extra resources to make sure that that's addressed. Cudahy is a little bit higher, but yes, Milwaukee Public Schools have 20.5% students with who need extra attention, have special needs. And if you do not adjust the funding formula, basically they are forced to try and absorb that into their budget. And this is something that Governor Evers has tried to move forward.
Is autistic. His last 2 years of high school were
Yeah.
a joke.
So moving on, we do have some problems with appointments. This again goes to the problem of getting folks who the governor has appointed to actually get hearings to then be seated. That number is now at 118. 118. Okay, 118 appointments that have not gotten a vote. So that's when you hear about this, the guy who's pictured there in the middle, Fred Preen, who's squatting in that spot now. I think this is an older headline. It's over a month, or sorry, over a year, because they refuse to have votes on this. There's others that they only get a vote when they're voted down. So it just means that everyone's kind of left with a, their future hanging over them. They don't know if they're going to be on the spot. And this is everything from as simple as like the director of tourism to the health secretary.
Expiration means nothing.
Sorry, what's that?
Expiration means nothing.
Apparently not. Apparently not. And there was an effort by the current Attorney General to question that, but because the law says upon replacement, meaning that there has to be a vote to replace them, therefore they can continue to stay in that seat indefinitely. It's very anti-democratic, democratic with a small d, to say that a person's just going to stay in a spot for the rest of their lives if there isn't an appointment change. Yeah, but it's a huge issue. Yeah.
And this is a taxpayer thing.
I mean, yeah, we pay. Yeah, it means that the administration isn't fully staffed, which means things get tougher in different places. So here is some additional info of funding getting blocked, of what this means, particularly in DNR funding. Some of these projects that have been in the works for years got anonymously blocked. There's one that was in the news up in Sheboygan, which is the one that's cited in the red box there. Another problem where we have a lack of discussion is the one on the right, Representative Sinicki already talked about, but one on the left might sound a little convoluted to folks. It's voting by paper ballot, which basically means when a bill passes, there's no discussion. There's no debate. There's just a piece of paper that comes in front of you and you circle yes or no. And that is how 100% of the bills in the Education Committee moved forward over the last year. So there was never any discussion or debate about them. They just said, and despite promises that there was going to be. So it means that there's a lot of the idea of what Representative Sinicki was talking about, where you could sit down and talk through things. There literally is never even a table. So
is there a chairman of that Senate committee that just says it's going to be paper ballot?
Yes, Alberta Darling.
Oh my God.
Alberta Darling.
Alberta Darling.
Darling, why would she get that wonderful name?
I didn't know we had to choose our names. I missed that. I missed that conversation. But here's some of the things that we did. There was some things that were we did have bipartisanship on lowering drug prices. There was a bill that reduces that in a minor way. Public defenders finally moved up their pay, which was 8 years too late, but it still got through. This one, particularly in Cudahy, was pretty popular. It's popular in my area. Unfortunately, it took a little while to pass, so the pandemic was kind of teetering out, but that one still got passed. I know.
Well, that was during the pandemic.
It was during the pandemic when I proposed it, and I mean, we're still in the pandemic, technically speaking, but like during the time where there were stay-at-home orders and whatnot, the restaurants figured out ways around it, but yeah, we finally got it on the books.
Yeah, that one actually came through my committee in the assembly.
Yeah, and it passed way too late, but anyway. Mental health care, which is huge, especially in areas that are underserved. And then ensuring there's a combination bills, AB 297, SB 94, will ensure that all sexual assault kits no longer go untested, which had been a huge, huge problem. And with that, go to any further questions or anything else we didn't get. We do, yeah, let's do it. Yeah. Yeah, table, and with that, yeah, close it.
Shut off the lights. Let's get out of here.
I just want to apologize for my time.
You are fine. Yeah, no, you're fine.
I've known for saying a lot worse, so don't worry about it.
We're legislators. We're used.
I like the word open.
Open, yeah. Okay. Is there any other topics that we didn't get to, or anything else that you were thinking? Okay, hey, I was wondering about.
Funding the police, how are we doing on that? The funding of the police.
The funding of the police, yeah. So
how is that going?
So it's a good question. Most of the state's responsibility comes in something called shared revenue. Have you ever Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chris. Does anyone know the term shared revenue?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you want to explain it?
No.
Because I don't feel like I'm trying to do open discussion here, so it's not just
Basically,
me.
the state gets a pot of money,
Yep.
and they
Distribute it throughout the state.
Yes.
As needed, or
Nope.
no,
No.
depending on who's got power.
Yes. So, that's essentially it. So shared revenue is something that started decades ago. And it basically said, hey, we're going to be the ones who collect income tax. None of the local governments will have the ability to collect their own income tax. We'll give you guys a 0.5% sales tax for each county. You can figure out how you want to spend it. And you can tax property. After that, you get everything else. Anything else you want to do, tough. We're going to get all the money, and then we'll distribute it. We will share that money with you.
And now that you brought up that tax,
money?
So this is the state budget that passes every year decides how the bulk of this funds are shared or not shared.
and now that you brought up taxes, where are we at with that stadium? I guess it's what, family?
I can get to that one next, but I want to get to your
Okay.
first question.
Okay.
I know,
Your
otherwise
table,
we're playing
you
Barrel of
put me on the
Monkeys and
table.
connecting.
Yeah, put you on the
one
table.
off one like that.
Question first.
But yeah, we'll add it to the parking lot here. We'll get to
Okay.
that. So anyways, the state has continued to reduce shared revenue to local communities, and they'll do things like pat themselves on the back, saying, we kept tax burden down, and then the local communities are still living where they can only increase property taxes by growth, which means new construction. So communities that are smaller that are growing, they have a higher percentage, and so therefore they can pull in more money that way. Larger established communities that have been here for a while, we don't have as much growth as a percentage of our economy, so therefore there's less taxes that can come in on a regular increase.
But who controls this?
I think you just said, yeah, Oak Creek, that's a perfect example.
The shared revenue is distributed by the state legislature, signed by the governor. It's a budget. The budget, it passes as a bill, has to pass June 30th of every single odd numbered year.
Maybe I'm stupid, but who actually does the distribution of the money?
The legislature.
Who's the person? Oh, the
Yeah, so the legislature. I mean, specifically, there's 16 members of a committee called the Joint Committee on Finance.
Okay.
8 from the Assembly, 8 from the Senate, and they decide, basically, the large
outlines of the budget. Every once in a while, there's a few things that get debated on the floor of the Senate, floor of the Assembly, but for the most part, it's the Joint Finance Committee that goes through item by item and decides where funds are going to end up going. So all that is to say, well, how come communities don't have enough funds to be able to deal with X, Y, Z, whatever it is? It's because the amount of shared revenue is reduced. So I would encourage you to call your mayor and ask, or call your alderman if you're wondering if they think shared revenue is fair. And they will 100% of the time say no. No, it is not. It is something I have frequent discussions with all of our local elected officials, because that's the thing that they would like. And that is actually now shifting over to saying they would rather have flexibility in terms of collecting different revenue, because the state is just hoarding the money or redirecting it to other projects that they would like. Hoarding sounds like a tough term, but the reality is, does everyone know that we have a surplus projected right now? How much money is sitting right at the state? So we can talk about all the problems we've got, but there's literally, like, I mean, just think of like what jackpot, the highest jackpot you could imagine, that's how much money is sitting there. Does anyone know the number?
Few
Pop
billion.
quiz, who knows? Anybody? What'd you say?
A few billion.
A few billion is correct.
Yeah.
3.8 billion with a B. 3.8 billion with a B. So it is sitting at the state, and we're out of session. There's been efforts to say, hey, why don't we spend it on? There was one proposal by the governor, $150 per person,
So they have
and
big
increasing
enough
funds for
vault
special
all
ed.
that money?
What's that?
A big enough vault?
Big enough vault. Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're in the digital age, so yeah, it's in a computer somewhere. But yes,
Okay.
if there's a vault at the state, I haven't seen it.
Somewhere in Mason.
Yeah, they don't give that one on the school tours, school trips. So there you go. Stadium tax. You had a question about stadium tax.
Yes.
It is expired right now. If you're talking about the Miller Park tax specifically,
And
Is it the American?
well, you can call it what you want, but it was originally.
Where are we at?
Okay, well, it's originally was a stadium tax before there was ever a Miller Park, where there was a discussion of the concept of the park.
Great.
I don't think even Representative Sneaky was there back then.
Shortly after.
Shortly after. So, but I have a good friend, Senator Carpenter, who I go to Miller Park in Anthem Field, or whatever it's called, and he tells me the history of it. That tax has finally expired as of 2 years ago. They finally sunset it. So what you might have been seeing in the news is where they're talking about instituting a new tax. That would have to take legislative action. Do you have thoughts on that?
If it's expired, how are we
Sounds
benefiting?
too logical.
Where's the benefit if it's expired?
Yeah, yeah. And they're not going broke. They're fine. They're fine. They don't need more public dollars, is my opinion.
They need to, what part of they need to upgrade the facility? Well,
Cool, do it. Go ahead.
Yeah,
No
it's
one's
like-
stopping you. Yeah, no one's stopping you. Yeah.
like, so like for tickets, they can upgrade it.
So where's that extra 1.65% or whatever going?
It's gone. It should be off of your,
It should be ours.
Yeah,
yeah, it should be off.
Yeah.
there were some talk by
Check your
some
receipts, yeah.
groups of, or people about shifting to another tax.
Nope.
But you can't do that.
You can't, no, you'd have to
Yeah,
institute a
you'd
new
have to go back
one.
into it. but-
So right now, are you literally checking your receipts?
She's gonna check her receipt.
Check your receipts. I love it. So right now, your sales tax should be 5%.
Oh, no, it was ice cream.
Oh,
Ice cream.
Oh, where's
Ice
your
cream,
good?
no tax.
So
That's
it's got
good.
5.6.
That's a good.
Grocery.
Groceries shouldn't be taxed anyway. I love luxury goods. I don't know if an ice cream qualifies as luxury goods. 5%. So if you look at your, this is your assignment for between now and the next time you have a tunnel, is go out and buy something, anything, and look at your receipt. It should say the sales tax should be 5%, and that goes to the state. And that generates, from Milwaukee County alone, that generates about $700 million a year. There's another 0.5% that goes to the county. That generates $70 million that goes to the county to be spent. There was another 0.1 on top of that. That went to the stadium district, which generated, if you're following the math, generated about, what was it? I lost the math. 1.4 million annually to be able to go, depending on what the collections were. 1.4. And so that one expired. So now your sales tax should be 5.5. That's different if you're downtown because there's a special stadium district that adds another 0.25.
depending on the
For the
geography
deer.
that you're in. So you might have gotten that, but that one just
Yeah.
goes to fund the Visitors Bureau there. So the stadium, the convention district.
Right, so just downtown.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just downtown. Yeah, and that goes to the convention district, which is good. Brings in fun. And just to be clear, and then, so that's your first assignment, and then if you get out of town, go check your sales tax in every other state. You don't have to go to every other state if you don't want to, but just go to any other.
Alaska and they have
You can check
no
and see.
taxes.
Well, Alaska's an outlier, literally.
So,
If you go down to
just in case
Illinois,
they're going to Alaska.
does anyone know what it is in Illinois?
7 point something?
9?
10.
10?
Yeah, 10.5. 10.5% sales tax. So whenever you see a sale and you're going down to, Gurney Mills, oh my gosh, what a deal. 10%. So just go to Johnson Creek for your outlet mall. Stay away from Gurney Mills. That's my advice. Okay. Any other topics or any other things? Representative Sminky, you want
I think you covered it.
to? All of it, the entire?
Yeah.
Anything else that people want to hit?
I have a personal question for you, Christine. When we're talking about that shared revenue, and this goes way back now, into the days when you helped us at Lincoln School and the students, and we would go over to the pond, and we would help with the birds and all that. Where'd you get the money for that?
It wasn't my money.
Did it come from shared revenue, or,
It was-
I mean, it had to be, funded. How did we do that?
That was through the parks, I believe.
Well, that was through the.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I thought you meant, where did I personally get the money?
No,
Like,
no,
what's
no,
my
no,
money?
no. No, because that was a
That
good
was the
experience.
first.
That was a wonderful experience for the kids. That was great.
Yeah, I'd love to do more of that, but nobody ever does that kind of stuff anymore, I don't think.
Or was there grant? There must have been some grant.
I'm not
money.
sure how it was funded.
Yeah, there must have been some grant money.
Yeah.
Well,
But that was a great,
Yeah.
that was a great time.
Yeah.
Well, since we have such a problem with underfunding of the police, earlier this year, during the spring elections, or maybe further than that, there was, a flyer from someone talking about a lot of money that was diverted to the Office of Violence Prevention. Who decides when that's going to happen? And just what does this office do? Because it's not helping any violence.
Yeah, it's the Office of Violence Prevention is Milwaukee, City of Milwaukee, so Cudahy doesn't have one of those. But this is about violence prevention. It has to do with people going out in the community for high-risk areas. We are at the day and age now where you can identify factors that indicate a person or a community is about to erupt, and that there's potential for violence to break out. And violence begets more violence. If there's a shooting or something, there's people who feel like they need to retaliate for that, and it causes and induces more violence. And so what the Office of Violence Prevention does is it goes out into those situations that are highly fraught and tries to talk people into saying, okay, let's change the system. I don't think that's funny. It works.
Yeah, it's not. Why would somebody do that? That's the job for the police to do. They're trained for that.
They are not. Police, in many cases, they come to a place, and it's good to be able to have somebody who is not a police officer who comes into the situation. Whereas if a police officer is there, they may just be looking for a reason to arrest that person or charge that person. Even if they're not, it may incite that person to feel like they are being attacked and targeted. Whereas a person who is a member of an office, like the Office of Violence Prevention, they come in plain clothes. They can speak from experience of dealing with others. A lot of times they come from a background that's similar, and it becomes that much easier for them to de-escalate. In a lot of cases, this works. The budget that they get is a fraction of a fraction of what the police budget is. And it does pay huge dividends. In fact, the Reggie Moore, who was the person who was directing this office, was just recognized by the White House for his work and the model that it represents, to be able to say, yes, this is
Reggie Moore.
Reggie Moore, yes, to be able to say this is what actually does work. So, yeah, I mean, I think that there's a sense that if you hire more police, there will be less crime, but the reality is they're not actually going out and preventing crime, they're trying to solve crime that's already happened.
Okay, so where can we go to find all of this great information on this Office of Violence Prevention?
If you just Google Office of Violence Prevention,
Okay.
or whatever the acronym is, Office OVP.
I would just go, you can actually even just go to the city of Milwaukee and share a link on it.
Okay.
They're pretty transparent. Sometimes they'll come to your church if you have a church and you'd like them to come to speak to it. They do that because they're always looking for volunteers. So, yeah.
Just a question, and I'm not sure I'm going to propose it correctly, but talking about urban sprawl, if I could put it this way, and looking at we're in a very, what would you say, issues with conservation, we're in terms of land usage, etc. On a state level, is there anyone who's looking at this particular kind of issue? Because what you're saying is mostly whatever land is available is quickly being developed. And developments that were already done are just staying vacant and being either torn down or nothing is happening with them at all. So it's kind of an issue, especially with regard to as we look at available farmland and if we look at what's happening in the world right now. We're talking about shortages in a variety of different areas. And is there any kind of movement on a statewide level in terms of kind of containing this or putting some restrictions on what I would say urban sprawl?
Yeah, I don't know if there's anybody actually in the state level looking at any of that.
There is, there hasn't been, and for the most part, zoning is decided by the local level. Our county is one of the few that doesn't do it. It's usually, it's all at the municipal level because all the way our county is, it's a little bit more ahead. Whereas other counties do have some control over zoning, so they'll decide that, what land use is appropriate. To a large degree, the state doesn't really do that. In fact, the only time we ever discussed it was going in the opposite direction to prevent smart planning.
Yeah.
There's a resolution to prevent smart planning, which is.
Yeah, the only time the state would really get involved is like maybe through DNR permitting or, looking at possible, wetlands.
If there's wetland use or if there's.
But other than that.
Yeah, if there's sale of public land. But yeah, wetland usage, unfortunately the law has shifted more towards people can end up filling wetland, as long as they create wetlands someplace else, despite it not being anywhere near where the original wetland is, which is like okay, you're just asking for problems, for the flooding to happen. But that was something that passed a while ago. So yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, it does make sense, but there's very little, I should say, that I can recollect on it.
But there's a policy, because by virtue of the fact that they're encouraging communities to build new, they're, rather than changing their revenue stream, the state is encouraging sprawl.
That's true. They're encouraging new growth.
Yes.
New building, that's true.
So that's a policy.
Yeah, that's true. So policy is going in the opposite direction. Yeah, sorry. Yes.
Has there been any concern or looking at what can be done with all these robocalls that are scams toward our seniors?
Oh my gosh, yes.
I mean, I'm tired of the, hi grandma, this is your grandson, I'm in town.
Oh, for real?
Oh, yeah, and then you say, oh, well, it doesn't sound like you. Oh, my nose is broken, I just have a broken nose. That's a real scam.
Really?
Oh, no one got that? No. Oh, I got that last year with a granddaughter, and I made a mistake, and I said, hey, it doesn't sound like you, which one is this, Jessica or Rachel? Oh, it's Rachel. Oh, and it went on, and then it went, get this, and she hit someone.
The problem is,
She hit someone, and she was pregnant, and she's in jail, and she needs a lawyer, and I was going pretty much with this because they said it was Rachel, and then I called her mother and I said, hey, Rachel, out of town? No, she's not out of town.
what happens is these scammers, most of them are from out of the country, first place, second place, they change their numbers so fast that they can't catch up with them.
Right.
So,
And, but is there any thought on how the seniors can be protected against this, or, yeah, you have to protect yourself, but.
Education and warning.
I've heard of stories of seniors that have gotten cooked with this, and they've
Yeah.
given thousands of dollars out.
Yeah, there's not really a way to be able to recuperate it, unfortunately. There is the national level, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, that is out to try and protect consumers, but it doesn't really hit on those issues, nor does it have the resources to tackle them.
And to follow up with this, what about, these people that come through the city and they don't have a permit and they're trying to sell things?
Oh, right. Yeah, I mean, you report that to the locals.
And I
because they're
have,
supposed
but
to.
it took a week for her to get back to me and say, oh, that's a
Would you,
police matter.
yeah.
That's a police, but she took a week from the city of Cudahy to call me and said, oh, well, by that time I knew it was a police matter. I called the police myself.
Yeah, they're the ones that are supposed to be able to.
And then there's another scam that's going through the city of Cudahy. This guy, this fellow that I know, he's 85, and these four guys construction came through, and they wanted to do something with his steps, and he says, no, I'm fine. And he says, but you need the work done. No, I'm fine. You need the work done. It's going to cause more problems. And to get rid of them, he said, okay, do it. Well, he got caught in thousands of dollars, and I saw what they did.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And they said, he questioned their license plate, and it was California, and they said, well, we haven't had it changed over yet, and we're in St. Francis, and, just so everybody knows, there's all these crappy scammers all out there for us.
Yeah, you gotta be very, 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 very careful.
But there's a lot, I'm seeing it here in Cudahy.
Yeah. Anybody else? Anything else? We're getting done wicked early, guys.
Well, I could,
Setting a bad expectation for Oak Creek, which is tomorrow.
we could take a minute to recognize somebody in this room.
Do it. Who?
Al Durka.
Does Al want to be recognized? Maybe Al just wants to hang out at the library. Al's turn.
Come on up. Come on up.
Hey.
Sharon, why don't you join us? You don't have
So
to.
Al was just recognized as a distinguished guest at UW Milwaukee. As the was it Lifetime Achievement? Lifetime Achievement Award.
These two, Al and Sharon Durka, live here in Cudahy. They kind of go about the wonderful work they do very quietly behind the scenes. Al is the president of, I gotta look it up, I can't remember, International Institute of Wisconsin. Yeah, come up here. The International Institute of Wisconsin. And Sharon is the founder and president of the Wisconsin Chiba Incorporated group. Through them, and especially through Chiba, Wisconsin, I've learned a lot. I'm still trying to learn how to use chopsticks. But anyhow, so we wanted to take a minute and just recognize Al tonight on his work for the International Institute of Wisconsin and their anniversary coming up. I've had the privilege actually being in meetings with Al when he's furiously working on issues regarding refugees. You think refugees come and nobody ever really thinks about what happens when they come over here. Who helps them find a place to go? Who helps them, access services? It's groups that Al and Sharon are part of. So they're a huge asset to this community. And Al's going to be retiring and be doing some fishing.
Hopefully.
But I don't think Sharon is.
Oh, she fishes too.
But she's not retiring.
She's retired. I mean,
Well, she's not retiring.
Yeah, she's
Retiring
retired.
retired. But so we wanted to take a minute to recognize the two of them and all the work they have done in this
Both have been very supportive of all the work we've done, and so we've tried to keep them in the loop in terms of what's happening all the time, both in the refugee situation and the international situation in terms of our relationship with other countries. And it happens to be especially with Japan, which is a major investor here in Wisconsin, especially with both Kikkoman Foods, which people probably are aware of. That's manufactured here in Wisconsin, and it's the largest in the world. But you don't really realize that. And about 20 years ago, you might say, well, how much do they really make, in terms of soy sauce? You see those little bitty packages, And at that time, they will not, how would you say, they would not share with you their numbers right now, but it used to be 20 million gallons of soy sauce. And that's naturally brewed through each year. So it goes in all kinds of products. So it's much larger now. And then now with Komatsu coming in terms of buying pH, et cetera, and building a new plant here in Milwaukee, it's a big investment that they've made here. And so it's been very great to be able to have them to participate in some of the events and also to make those relationships much stronger.
I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah, on the individual level of being able to welcome migrants and refugees who are looking for help, which is huge, especially at the time of this. Very needed. I remember, it seems like last year, but it absolutely wasn't, when we were in the room over for a celebration when you had a class of people who were coming through.
That was at the Chiba.
That was Chiba.
Chiba.
That was our sister state relationship.
Yeah, we were rolling through. So,
Yeah, I really had the benefit of learning a lot about Chiba, Japan.
Okay, and we're very proud Cudahyans, if we can put it that way.
Yeah.
So it's great. Okay, thank you very much.
Except when we bought our house.
Except
when we bought the house.
Yeah. You understand, she's from South Milwaukee.
So when we bought the house and we were driving home, I said, Al, we can't move there. South Milwaukee, Whitefish Bay, nothing seems like that.